Hello, everyone, and welcome. I am so excited to spend these next 7 days with you and to share each day a little bit more about how Reiki can support you in finding greater healing and happiness in your life, as well as to awaken to your most authentic or true nature. And in that process, to also begin to activate and experience your natural intuitive gifts. But before we get started, I'd like to just talk about a few logistics for the week. In today's email, I include a guided meditation download. And in that meditation, I include each day in your inbox, you'll receive a daily inspiration about Reiki and a daily affirmation to use with that guided meditation download. I also have an introductory track for the guided meditation that you can listen to, but I'll also discuss this introductory track later in this video as well so that you can get a visual cue. And this introductory track is about the lower Hara center, which is your center of gravity just below your belly button, and how to utilize that energy center with the breathing during the meditation. I include in today's email a link to our community page, our Facebook group called Reiki Essence Luminaries. And this Facebook group I created recently for people who are interested in learning more about Reiki, as well as for those who are already experiencing and on the Reiki journey to be able to ask questions and share other things that inspire them about life and what they're up to. And it's a great way to stay connected with like-minded people. So I invite you to click on that link and ask to join the group, and then I will I'll give you permission to join the group, and then you can also further explore more about Reiki that way as well. And then finally on Friday we have a live conference call where you can ask questions about Reiki. And for those of you who can't necessarily be on the call live, you can email me your questions and I will answer them. The call will be recorded, and so that you'll be able to listen in after the fact. I also will be taking us on a guided meditation journey to a healing sanctuary. So this will be a virtual space that we'll gather to be able to experience the Reiki energy as a group. And again, for those of you who aren't on the call live, you'll still be able to experience the flow of that energy because as we dive deeper into the Reiki journey in Reiki level 2, we start to experience Reiki as it transcends time and space. And so you'll get a taste of what that is like. So now, for those of you who are brand new to Reiki, welcome. I love talking about Reiki to people who have never experienced it or have heard about it, but just aren't clear about what Reiki is. So I like to describe Reiki as the white canvas that all of life paints itself. When you look at a painting, you see all the colors and the beautiful shapes and textures. But underneath all of that, there's this white canvas. And without that white canvas, the painting could not exist. And so Reiki is that layer of energy, that high vibrational energy that exists within everything. And so in the practice of Reiki, what we are doing with the breath, the meditation, the Reiki principles that we contemplate through in our day-to-day lives, as well as the hands-on healing practices, what we're doing is we're tuning into that flow of Reiki energy to help to support our healing process, whether that be actual physical healing that is needed, or whether that's emotional healing that's needed, or if it's that we are going through a spiritual awakening process and we need some support through that process. So for many people, this awakening process, there are many different paths that lead us to that, to spiritual awakening. For some, this awakening process happens because, you your day-to-day life is going fine. You're going to work, you're coming home, you're meeting your responsibilities, but you're just feeling like there's something missing. There's just some missing piece, and there's a certain emptiness that you're experiencing. And so that is one path that will take people to the awakening process. And then another path that can bring somebody to the awakening process is when something really drastic, something dramatic or traumatic happens, such as the unexpected loss of a loved one, the unexpected loss of your home, the unexpected loss of a job. It's something that takes place in your life that kind of shakes the ground under your feet and makes you question everything about life in the end. And then a third path that can lead somebody to the awakening process is when they're in a health crisis. A major serious illness comes up, and I'm seeing a lot of that happening especially with my clients in the corporate world who are developing autoimmune diseases, as well as, of course, people who are battling cancer and other serious illnesses. This awakening process unfolds because the physical body is actually speaking up and saying something's out of alignment here. And so Reiki is a really great tool when you are going through this awakening process to help you to stay present and to find healing in bite-sized pieces in your everyday life without it having to be this, major upheaval or this major new thing that you have to take on. What I love about Reiki is that even just 5 to 10 minutes a day of practice can really transform your life. And in some ways, that's almost better than trying to take on a whole new big habit in your life. So I know the energies this summer have been quite intense. For those of you who might follow astrology, we've had a lot of retrograde activity happening. And for those of you who don't study astrology, that's okay too. You may have already been sensing or feeling these energies. And so there's been an invitation from the universe, from the heavens, so to speak, for us to journey inside and to ask ourselves, how can we live more in alignment with our authentic nature? There's a big shift happening in the macrocosm, and we're seeing a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety coming out and being expressed in the mainstream media, of course. But it's because these things are coming out to be healed because of this macrocosmic shift that's happening. And so on an individual level, people are more and more longing for their lives to be more in alignment with what they value most in life. When we're children, we're conditioned to live life, in a certain way, according to society's rules. And so as we get older, we start to think about, well, wait a second, is this really in alignment with what I value most? And so as an individual, as we grow and awaken to our true nature, we're then contributing to this macrocosmic shift that's happening to make the world a better place for humanity. So I always say, as we heal ourselves, we're really healing, making whole the universe and others. So in that process of the awakening, as I talk about in the title of this 7-day intro, it's about awakening also your intuitive healer. And to study Reiki or to practice Reiki, you don't have to want to become a professional healer. Instead, this can, like I said before, this could be used as a tool to help support you in your spiritual growth, as well as your healing process with whatever challenges you are facing. And so when people come to me for Reiki, or my students begin to study Reiki, I tend to find that their intuitive awareness starts to activate. And so Reiki helps to keep them grounded in the present moment as they start to step into these special gifts that start to show up in their lives. For example, one of my students, when she first came to me for her very first Reiki session, she described stepping out onto the sidewalk after the session and looking all around the city and noticing this beautiful, loving glow around everything, including the buildings and the cars, as well as the people. And, she's a graphic designer, and she's a very talented graphic designer. And so her natural senses tend to be more visual. And so, of course, then as she awakened to this flow of energy, she was able to visually tune into the energy all around her and see more than just the three-dimensional material world around her, but to actually visualize what was underneath the surface and all around with this energetic field of love that she was experiencing. So that's just one example of how your intuitive gifts can start to activate when you tune into the flow of Reiki. Now, while Reiki itself is not an intuitive practice necessarily, it is a practice that helps to support our intuitive awareness. And it helps to support us in that it helps to keep us grounded in the present moment, even when these senses are activating and we're starting to have these unusual experiences. I know for myself, when I first walked into my Reiki 1 class, I had on a few occasions myself seen energy fields around other people, particularly when there was a strong emotion involved. And I remember walking into my teacher's Reiki 1 class and looking around the room. There were 30 of us, and each person had a different colored helmet around their head. It was like a helmet of light. And I had never, ever experienced something like that before. And so in general, my intuitive sensitivities tended to be more on a feeling level. And I tend to be an empath, meaning that when I walk into the room, I feel people's energies. And if there's tension in the room when I was a child, I would literally feel my body get weak. My muscles would get weak. My stomach would get tight. And of course, I didn't have the language for what was going on. But then as I got older and I started to see colors occasionally in people's auras, I realized that that became a visual reflection of my natural empathy that I would experience from time to time. So that is actually another sense that many of you may experience, which is empathy. And what Reiki did for me was it helped me to transform my empathic nature into a gift of clairsentience in my life. Because as empaths, that's one of the rawest forms of intuition that we can have. And when we're empathic, we're acting like a sponge and we take on other people's feelings. And in some cases, I've seen some of my students have actually taken on the physical symptoms of somebody who is sick as well. And so what Reiki helped me to do was help to create a filter to understand what are my feelings, what is the other person's feelings, and to kind of put up a filter with that. And then to be able to realize that the best gift I can be in any given situation is not to take on a person's vibrations, but instead to be in the flow of Reiki and to allow that light to then transform and heal anybody who walks in the path of that flow of light. So it is not our responsibility to fix somebody else or to fix a situation, but instead to stand in our light. And yes, we are going to sense what people are feeling, but to stand in our light of compassion so that if we are with somebody who is in a state of suffering, whether they're grieving or they're angry or they're worried, that our job is to have compassion for that and to not take it on and to stay in our high vibration of light. And so that is one of the gifts that Reiki gave me so that I could then really harness my intuitive capabilities. And so now, I can feel and understand and be much more compassionate for somebody else without it draining my energy. So as I was saying before, there are different paths that bring us to the awakening process. And what brought me to Reiki and ultimately my own awakening process was in my early 30s. I had gone through an extremely emotionally challenging time in my life. Some unexpected events had happened, and that had left me extremely drained. And being the raw empath that I was, that I just talked about, I had a tendency to put everybody else's needs before my own. And so in the course of all of that, I ended up, my immune system ended up getting really low, and I had developed a precancerous condition. So it was both a series of traumatic events as well as a health crisis that brought me to the practice of Reiki. And they always say when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And that really was the case with my connection with Margaret Ann Case, who was my teacher. I, at the time, was a dancer. She was a trained opera singer. And so we both had that connection of being in the arts, especially the performing arts. And so she really was like a big sister to me in that she helped to guide me through my healing process. And about 3 months after I took my Reiki 1 class, my test results started coming back negative, and there's never been a trace of this virus in my body ever since. And so I was lucky that I was able to transform my health. And even my medical doctor, when I go for my annual checkup, she always asks me how my Reiki practice is going. Because while she knows that we do need Western medicine, she also is very much a believer that unraveling it from both ends, both the energetic end as well as the medical end, is important for helping a person to find fullness in the healing process. And I remember her always saying to me, the most important thing for me is to learn how to relax so that my immune system can stay strong. And that is ultimately what Reiki did for me to help me heal physically. But I had no idea that the emotional healing that I would receive from Reiki, as well as the spiritual awakening process, and also the ability to sharpen my natural intuitive capabilities, would lead me to ultimately becoming a Reiki healer and a Reiki teacher. So I'd like you now to just take a moment and think about yourself, for yourself. What natural senses do you tend to activate throughout the day? Do you tend to be more visual? Do you do a lot of reading, or do you look at a computer screen a lot for the work that you do? Do you tend to absorb information visually? Or do you tend to hear things more clearly? I know for my Reiki teacher, being an opera singer, she was clairaudient, and so she would really listen in to what we would say in class, and she would zero in on the words we'd use. And that is how she absorbed information. For others, it might be that gut feeling. You just always are getting those gut feelings that something's off here. You're not sure what it is, but you tend to be a feeler. So just take a moment now and just contemplate or write down on paper the ways you absorb information. And now, another aspect of intuition that I'd like to talk about, and then have that lead into something I want you to ask yourself this week. is synchronicity is another form of intuition. And one of my Reiki master graduates, the first time she came to see me for a Reiki session, she was really questioning why she was coming to see me. An intuitive reader had sent her to me, and she was working a high pressure corporate job, and never in a million years thought that she would end up doing this healing work. And she's actually now a very well known animal communicator here in New York City. And so as she was coming to me for that first Reiki healing session, she was questioning why she was going. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, she was walking to my office. This white feather came and hovered in front of her at eye level, made 3 circles, and then took off. And so for her, it kind of startled her, and she was like, wow, okay, well, that woke me up. I guess I do need to go for this healing session. And it was from there that she ended up enjoying the receiving Reiki so much that she took a Reiki 1 class. And again, she was taking Reiki 1 for her own personal healing and was not necessarily thinking that she would enjoy giving Reiki to others, but she discovered that she did. And then that eventually led into her giving Reiki to animals. And then her intuitive sensitivities began to open up, and she began to receive messages from the animals. And from there, she ended up honing those gifts in and becoming an animal communicator. And so synchronicity is another way in which your intuitive awareness can open up. I've had many of my students come to me after they start practicing Reiki for self-care and saying to me, I'm seeing these number patterns everywhere. And I had one student, and at first I thought, well, I know a lot of people know about that phenomenon of seeing repeated number patterns throughout the day, and then taking that and looking it up to see what it means. And almost every time when somebody comes to me about that, they're seeing the numbers 1111, and I like to think of that as an angel wink. It means that the angels are winking at you and just letting you know that you're on the right track. And then from there, people will start to see the number patterns like 333 or 222. I know for myself, I get the number pattern 919 a lot. And that was my grandmother's birthday. And so whenever I have something on my mind, or this past week I was really worried about something, and I saw the timestamp on a document that said 919, and I realized that was my grandmother saying to me, everything's going to be okay. And, she passed away almost 10 years ago. And so that's my way of feeling connected with her. And so for some people, it's number sequences that they'll start to see, and they just start to notice certain patterns. Somebody else I know, it was pennies on the ground after her father passed away, and whenever she saw a penny on the ground, she knew that it was her father's presence was with her. So as this week goes on, I want to invite you to not only take note of where your natural intuitive sensitivities might open up and awaken, but also just look for signs and synchronicities that might happen. You might have a question on your mind, and then all of a sudden you'll be standing in line waiting for your cup of coffee at Starbucks, and you overhear somebody who says something that resonates with the question you were asking, and then you might find your answer from there. So what I'd like you now to do is take a moment and just write down something in your life that you would like to see resolved, something that needs healing, or if there's something that you are looking to manifest in your life. Go ahead and take a moment and just write down a sentence or two about that intention. And then also write down any questions that you might have around that intention. Questions oftentimes, I know for me at least, the questions come up around the how it's going to happen, because sometimes we really don't have that higher perspective right now on how something can happen. We know we want it, but we just don't know how it can possibly happen. And then other times the question might be around the timing, like, well, when is this going to happen, So just take a moment and think about what intention you might have going on in your life for either healing or manifestation, and then whatever unknowns or questions you might have around that. So I'm just going to give you a couple of minutes to begin contemplating that. And so now you might, if you need more time, I invite you to use the pause button on the video and continue to contemplate this before we continue. But now I want you I want to discuss now about how one of the big things I want you to be able to experience this week as we move forward is Reiki as the ultimate tool for self-care and for self-love and cultivating self-love. Because when we nourish ourselves and we're loving to ourselves and we show ourselves compassion, over time we can't help but be loving and compassionate with others. And then we become a shining light for others. And these things happen in our day-to-day lives. I know over time, I get more often now, I have people reflect that back to me. I remember one time walking into the hardware store one day, and all I did was smile at the guy and say hello. And he had been working in the store all day, and he said, "You are the first person who walked in and actually looked at me like I was a human being." And he was having a really bad day, and just being in that presence of light, just going about my everyday, gave that person a moment of feeling heard and feeling seen and feeling honored. And so we never know when we're in alignment with who we truly are in our true nature, how we're going to have an impact on those around us. So the first step with the practice of Reiki is to really anchor ourselves in that day-to-day self-care. And one of the first things I teach in Reiki is how to connect with the lower Hara center. So I'm going to stand up to show you exactly where the lower Hara center is. So if you put your fingers on your belly button, and then about 2 to 3 finger widths below that is your lower Hara center. For anybody who practices Tai Chi or Qigong, you know what I'm talking about. And it's in Chinese and Japanese philosophies, instead of chakras, what they talk about are the 3 Hara centers. So you have the Hara center, which is the lower Hara center, which is centered just below your belly button. And oftentimes you'll see the Buddha statues where they have the Samadhi mudra. And that frames, what that's doing is framing the lower Hara center. And so when we sit to meditate, I'll oftentimes have my hands in this mudra to frame my lower Hara center. And then we have the middle Hara center, which is the heart. And then we have the upper Hara center, which is our center of intuition. But before we can expand into the heart and the higher realms, just like a tree can only grow as tall as its roots are anchored into the ground. And so this lower Hara center is the first place for us to connect, to get anchored into our bodies, so that we can then grow spiritually and energetically, awaken to our spiritual and intuitive awareness. And so what I'd like to invite you to do right now is to either put your hands there or to put your hands in the Samadhi mudra, and then just gently drop your eyelids. Don't close your eyes tight, but just drop your eyelids and take a nice deep inhale. And on that inhale, imagine, sense, or feel a sphere of white light suspended in the middle of your lower Hara center. And then on the exhale, imagine, sense, or feel that flow of energy moving out from your heart center and expanding out through every cell of your being. And with each inhale and each exhale, this flow of energy grows stronger. It begins to flow through every cell of your being. And out through every pore of your skin and out into your auric field, flowing through both your physical and your energetic layers. And as you do this, when you're ready, just take a moment and ask yourself, what is it that I need today to feel happy, whole, and complete? You know, perhaps the answer could be that you need to get a little more rest, or you need a little more water, or maybe it's that you need to laugh a little more. So just, when you do this breath, just take a moment to just tune into yourself and just ask yourself, what is it that I need today? And those needs change from day to day. And oftentimes it's just these simple little adjustments that we need to make sure that we feel fully present in our lives. Because that's the other purpose of tuning into the breath of the lower heart center, is to take the mind from worrying about what's next, worrying about the future, dwelling on something that happened in the past, and really finding the power of what it means to live fully in the present moment. And so what this is it gives the mind something to focus on, because our mind is always firing off. And as we evolve as a society with all the digital technology, we constantly have information coming at us on our phones, our computers. Just walking around New York City, everything's got an advertisement on it. And so we're always being mentally stimulated. And so this breath is just so powerful to help give that mind a break, so that we can tune in instead of tuning out, which is what we're going through life doing oftentimes. And so I invite you to do the guided meditation download that I share with you each day. It's about, I think, 8 to 10 minutes long. And you'll be working with this breath, and this will give you, your mind, a few minutes to take a coffee break, and to just give it some rest so that you can tune in to the subtleties of what will help you thrive each day. And again, I invite you also this week to just think about what questions you have around what's going on in your life. And just begin to tune in and be aware of the subtleties of everything around you, and see what comes up, see what answers come up, and then I'll invite you to join the Facebook group and share each day with us, what's going on and what you're experiencing, and have any questions answered, and then we can take it from there. So I want to thank you so much for participating in this Reiki intro this week. I'm really looking forward to our journey together. And if you need any support, please do not hesitate to reach out. Send me an email. If you need to talk, we can take a few minutes and chat on the phone. So in the meantime, have a beautiful Sunday, and I look forward to connecting with you later this week. Bye-bye.